The papers were already shredded. My brother just didn't know that yet. I was standing in the kitchen making coffee when my phone lit up with a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was a Tuesday morning in February. I remember because the news was playing on my laptop and the anchor was talking about a snowstorm pushing down from the north. I almost let it go to voicemail. Instead, I picked up. It was a loan officer from a credit union in Raleigh. She was polite, professional, the kind of voice that stays calm when delivering bad news because she'd done it too many times to feel the weight of it anymore. She wanted to confirm that I had co-signed a small business loan in the amount of $87,000 3 weeks ago. She wanted to confirm my employment and run a quick verbal verification. I sat down on the kitchen floor. Not in a chair. On the floor. I had never been to Raleigh. I had never walked into that credit union. I had never co-signed anything for my brother's landscaping company. Not because I didn't know how to, but because I had promised myself years ago that I never would. I told her there had been a mistake. She told me the paperwork had my name, my social security number, and my signature on it. She told me the loan had already been dispersed. She thanked me for my time and said someone from their fraud department would be in touch. I sat on that floor for a long time after I hung up. The coffee maker beeped. The news anchor moved on to sports. I just sat there, staring at the cabinet under the sink, doing the math on something I had always known was coming but had hoped, foolishly, would never actually arrive. My brother had finally used me up. Growing up, there were 2 versions of every story in our house. There was the version my mother told at church, at dinner, at every holiday gathering where she needed an audience. In that version, my brother was brilliant and ambitious, and just needed a little extra support to reach the potential God had clearly written all over him. He was the firstborn. He was the one who looked like our father. He was the one who had inherited whatever quality our mother believed made someone worth investing in. Then there was the version I lived. I was 3 years younger, and I was the quiet one, which in our family was a polite way of saying I was the one nobody worried about. I got good grades without being asked. I worked part-time through high school without being pushed. I applied to college, got a scholarship, and left without a send-off party because the weekend of my departure, my brother had a scrimmage, and everyone went to that instead. I didn't make a scene. I loaded my car by myself at 6 in the morning, and I drove 4 hours north, and I built a life that had nothing to do with being invisible. I became a financial analyst. I was good at it. I understood numbers the way some people understand people, intuitively, without having to try too hard. I bought a condo at 27. I had a savings account that would have made my college self weep with relief. I had built something clean and quiet and entirely my own. My brother had built something too. He had built a trail of unfinished things. A business degree he never used. A landscaping company that had good years and catastrophic ones. 2 trucks, one of which he'd managed to flip in a ditch on a job site. A wife who looked exhausted in every photograph. A mother who looked at all of this and somehow saw a man being held back by bad luck instead of a man who spent every resource he was handed and then looked around for the next one. I was always the next one. He had borrowed money from me 7 times over the course of my adult life. Small amounts at first. A few hundred here, a few hundred there. Then bigger. $5,000 when his first truck needed a new engine. $8,000 when the IRS came after him for a year he'd forgotten to file. Each time, he paid back just enough to keep the door open for the next ask. I was not a sister to him. I was a line of revolving credit with a familiar face. I had cut him off 2 years before the phone call. I had done it quietly, by email, after he asked me to put a piece of equipment on my credit card because his was maxed. I told him I loved him and I was done. He told me I was selfish and that family didn't count beans like a stranger. My mother called me that same evening and told me I needed to remember where I came from. I told her I remembered perfectly. I hung up and I did not answer her calls for 6 days. What I did not know, what I could not have known because I had stopped watching closely, was that cutting off my money had not made my brother resourceful. It had made him creative in the worst possible direction. He had my social security number from an old tax document I had helped him file 3 years earlier. He had seen my signature on enough loan applications, on enough birthday cards and Christmas checks, that he was confident he could replicate it well enough to fool a notary who was probably working through a backlog of paperwork on a Thursday afternoon. He was mostly right. The notary had stamped it. The loan officer had processed it. $87,000 had landed in his business account 22 days before the credit union called me on a Tuesday morning in February. I did not call my brother after I hung up with the loan officer. I did not call my mother. I sat on the kitchen floor until the cold from the tile worked its way through my pajama pants and into my joints. And then I stood up, poured my coffee out because it had gone cold, and I started making a list. I had been a financial analyst for 7 years. I understood documentation. I understood paper trails. I understood that the difference between a problem and a crime was often just a matter of who had preserved the right records and who had not. I was very good at preserving records. I called a fraud attorney that morning. She was 45 minutes outside of Charlotte and had been referred to me by a colleague at work who had dealt with an identity theft case 2 years earlier. I drove to her office that afternoon with every piece of documentation I had. Tax returns showing my income and address for the last 5 years. My own bank statements. A screenshot of the email I had sent my brother 2 years ago, officially declining any further financial involvement. Phone records showing I had not called or texted him in over 14 months. I laid it all out on her desk like evidence at a crime scene, which is exactly what it was. She looked everything over. She did not seem surprised. She had the same calm as the loan officer, built from too many years watching people betray the people who trusted them. She told me the case was straightforward. Signature forgery, identity fraud, fraudulent loan application. She told me the notary who had stamped the document was the weakest link in the chain, because notaries are supposed to verify identity in person. And if the notary had stamped a document without proper verification, they were potentially liable too. I authorized her to file the police report that afternoon. I want to be honest about what I felt when I made that decision, because I think people expect the answer to be righteous anger, and it was not. It was grief. It was a specific, tired grief that comes from finally accepting that the person you grew up with, the person who knows your middle name, and the way you used to cry at animated movies, is capable of looking at your entire financial life and seeing something to take. It was the grief of being right about something you had spent years hoping you were wrong about. I cried in my car for about 20 minutes in the parking lot of the attorney's office. Then I drove home. Then I got to work. The fraud attorney filed the police report. The detective assigned to the case reached out to the notary within 4 days. The notary, it turned out, had not met with me in person. My brother had presented a photocopy of my driver's license, which he had photographed years ago during the tax filing, and told her I was waiting in the car due to a medical appointment running long. She had stamped the document without following proper protocol, which made her professionally exposed in a way she had no interest in defending. She gave a full statement within 48 hours. She confirmed she had never seen me. She confirmed she had been handed a copy of my license, not the original. She confirmed the man who brought the paperwork in matched the photograph my attorney had sent her of my brother. I had everything I needed. The notary's statement, the police report number, my attorney's filing with the credit union's fraud department, a certified copy of the loan documents showing the forgery, and the email, the 14-month-old email I had sent my brother telling him I was done, which established that I had no financial relationship with him and no motive to help him secure a loan. I put everything in a blue folder. I kept 1 copy at home and 1 copy in my attorney's office. I labeled the folder the way my grandmother used to label her insurance documents, neatly, in black pen, with a date in the corner. Then I waited. It did not take long. My brother called me on a Saturday morning, 3 weeks after the credit union had called me. He did not sound panicked. He sounded the way he always sounded when he needed something, which was warm and easy, and like someone who had already decided the conversation was going to go his way. He asked how I was doing. He said he'd been thinking about me. He said he missed me. I had not heard from him in over a year. I said I was doing fine. I asked what he needed. He paused for just a moment, recalibrating, because I had not played along with the warmth. Then he told me there was a situation with a business loan. He said there had been some kind of administrative mix-up with the paperwork. He said the credit union was asking questions and things were getting complicated and he needed me to come to a meeting with him on Thursday to help clear it up. He said it was nothing serious. He said it would take maybe an hour. I asked him what kind of meeting. He said just to sit down with the loan officer and maybe a representative from the bank's compliance team. He said it was a formality. He said he just needed me to confirm that I had been aware of the loan and had agreed to it, and that there had been some miscommunication about the paperwork process. He wanted me to walk into a bank and commit fraud to cover fraud. I told him I would think about it. He said he really needed me there. I said I understood. I hung up and I called my attorney. She told me to go. She told me to go and say nothing and let him show his hand completely. Because a man who believes he still has control is a man who will keep talking. She told me to wear the small digital recorder she had advised me to keep in my bag ever since the case was filed. She told me that North Carolina was a one-party consent state, which meant I could legally record any conversation I was a participant in, without disclosing it to the other party. I said I would be there. I told my brother Thursday worked. I drove to the credit union on a morning so cold the windshield fogged from the inside before the heater had a chance to catch up. I wore a gray blazer over a black turtleneck. I wore my hair down. I did not look like a woman walking into a setup. I looked like a woman walking into a business meeting, which is exactly what I intended. My brother was waiting in the lobby with his wife, who stood slightly behind him with her arms crossed and her eyes fixed on the floor. She had always been that way around me, a woman performing loyalty she wasn't sure she felt. I said hello to both of them. My brother hugged me. His arms were too tight. The hug of someone who needs something, not someone who missed you. He walked me into the conference room before the loan officer arrived, and he spoke quickly and quietly. He told me the story had always been that I had agreed to co-sign. He told me if I just confirmed that the signature was mine, and there had been a misunderstanding about the process, they would not pursue anything further, and the loan would be restructured. He said the credit union just needed someone to absorb the liability, and I was already on the paperwork, so the simplest thing was for me to stay on the paperwork. His wife nodded slowly from her chair, not meeting my eyes. He said he was family. He said I had always been the stable one, the smart one, the one who could weather something like this without it ruining her. He said $87,000 was not nothing, but it was manageable on my salary over time. He said he would pay me back. I looked at him for a long moment. He was 34 years old, and he was asking me to absorb a felony. He was asking me with the same face he'd used to ask me for a ride to practice when we were kids. The same easy confidence that had always assumed I would say yes. I said, "Let's wait for the loan officer." She came in 2 minutes later with the compliance coordinator, a younger man with a notepad who sat slightly to the side and wrote things down without looking up. She introduced herself and thanked us for coming in. She said the purpose of the meeting was to clarify the circumstances of the loan application and address the fraud claim that had been filed. My brother's head turned toward me so fast I heard his neck crack. He said there must be a mistake. He said no fraud claim had been filed, that this was a documentation issue, a clerical matter. His voice had shifted. The warmth was gone. He was working without a net now. The loan officer said the fraud claim had been filed by the co-signer of record, which was me, in coordination with the Mecklenburg County Sheriff's Office, approximately 3 weeks ago. My brother looked at me. His wife's arms dropped to her sides. The compliance coordinator kept writing. I reached into my bag and set the blue folder on the table. I opened it, and I laid out the documents in the order my attorney had advised. The police report number. The notary's signed statement confirming she had never met me in person, and had stamped the document based on a photocopied ID. The email from 2 years ago, printed on clean white paper, time-stamped, and certified, showing that I had formally and in writing ended any financial cooperation with my brother 14 months before the loan application was filed. My attorney's formal correspondence to the credit union's fraud department. I did not say anything dramatic. I just put the papers on the table. The compliance coordinator stopped writing and started reading. My brother pushed back from the table. He said I was lying. He said the notary was lying. He said I had agreed to this verbally, that I had told him over the phone it was fine, and that I had changed my mind to sabotage him because I had always been jealous of him. He looked at his wife and she looked away. I said nothing. I let him talk. My attorney had told me that the most important thing I could do in that room was to let him speak without interruption, because every word he said was being recorded and every word was digging the hole deeper. She had been right. He said things in that room that I don't think he would have said if he had stopped to think for even 60 seconds. He said he had done what he had to do. He said my credit was just sitting there doing nothing while he was trying to build something. He said family was supposed to help each other and I had abandoned him and this was my fault as much as his. The loan officer asked the compliance coordinator to pause, and she called in the bank's legal liaison, who arrived 7 minutes later and asked my brother to stop speaking until he had consulted with an attorney. My brother said he didn't need an attorney. The legal liaison said that was his choice, but the bank was now in contact with law enforcement and he strongly advised otherwise. His wife started crying quietly in the corner. She was not crying for me. I understood that. She was crying for the version of her life that was about to change. My brother looked at me one final time before the legal liaison asked them both to step out of the room. He looked at me the way he had looked at me our entire lives, like I was a problem he hadn't figured out how to solve yet. Like I was a tool that had stopped working correctly. I looked back at him without flinching. He was charged 6 weeks later. Signature forgery, fraudulent loan application, identity theft. The notary surrendered her commission and settled with the credit union separately. The credit union worked with my attorney to have my name formally removed from all associated documents and cleared from any credit reporting within 30 days. My credit score, which had taken a brief hit when the loan first appeared on my report, was restored and then some. I did not attend any of the subsequent hearings. My attorney handled everything. I went to work. I ran the numbers on a portfolio restructuring for a client in Phoenix. I made coffee in the morning and I watched the snow come in and I paid my own mortgage on time like I always had. My mother called me the night the charges were filed. She did not call to check on me. She called because my brother had called her first and given her the version of events in which I had blindsided a man who was only trying to keep his family afloat. She used the word betrayal. She said she could not believe I had gone to the police over a paperwork issue. She said I had always been cold. She said she had worried about me my whole life for exactly this reason. I let her finish. Then I told her that her son had used my social security number without my consent, had forged my signature on a legal document, had secured a loan in my name that I had not agreed to, and had then invited me to a meeting where he intended to pressure me into committing fraud to cover his crimes. I told her I had a recording of that meeting. I told her I had an email from 2 years ago showing I had drawn a clear boundary and he had chosen to cross it anyway. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said I could have handled it differently. I told her I agreed. I could have ignored the loan officer's call. I could have let $87,000 sit on my credit and dragged my score down for years. I could have walked into that conference room and lied to a compliance officer under penalty of perjury. I could have done all of those things. Or I could have handled it exactly the way I did. She hung up. I did not call back. There are people in my life, good people, friends and a therapist I see on Tuesday afternoons, who have told me they admire how I handled it. They use words like strong and brave and strategic. I understand why. But I want to be honest about what it actually felt like from the inside. It felt like pruning. Like the specific, methodical work of cutting dead weight off something you want to survive. It wasn't righteous. It wasn't even satisfying in the way people imagine revenge is supposed to feel satisfying. It was just necessary. It was the thing that had to happen so that I could continue to exist without carrying the weight of everyone who had decided my stability was their resource. I know what it is to be the one in the family who keeps everything running. I know what it is to be so reliable that people stop seeing you as a person and start seeing you as infrastructure. I know what it is to tell yourself that one more time won't hurt, one more loan, one more favor, one more time absorbing someone else's consequence. I did that for years. I got very good at it. I got better at stopping. The condo is quiet now. I repainted the kitchen in the spring, a pale yellow that catches the morning light. I have a plant on the windowsill that I have kept alive for 8 months, which is a personal record. I have a savings account that no one else knows the password to. My brother pled guilty to a reduced charge and received probation and a structured repayment agreement with the credit union. His wife filed for separation 4 months after the charges were filed. I do not know where he is living now. I do not ask. My mother and I speak occasionally. She does not bring up my brother. I do not bring him up either. We talk about weather and neighbors and a cousin who recently had a baby. It is a shallow conversation and we both know it, but it is the conversation we have agreed on without ever saying so. And for now, it is enough. I was at a coffee shop a few weeks ago. The kind of place with exposed brick and too many plants and baristas who know your name if you come in often enough. A woman at the table next to me was on the phone with someone, her voice low but her body tight, the posture of someone being asked for something they didn't want to give. I recognized that posture. I had worn it for most of my 20s. I didn't say anything to her. It wasn't my place. But I watched her hang up and stare at her cup for a long moment. And I recognized that silence too. The silence of someone doing the math on what it would cost to say no. I hope she runs the numbers. The thing nobody tells you about protecting yourself from the people you love is that it doesn't feel like a victory. It doesn't feel like justice. At least not in any clean, cinematic way. What it feels like is an exhale. Long and slow. The kind you didn't know you had been holding. It feels like setting down a bag you had been carrying for so long you had stopped noticing how heavy it was. You put it down, and you stand up straight, and you feel the absence of it everywhere. In your shoulders, in your sleep, in the small everyday decisions that used to be tangled up in someone else's needs. I did not ruin my brother. I want to be clear about that. He had been building toward this outcome for 20 years. He had made every choice that led him to that conference table. I was not the cause of anything that happened to him. I was just the person who finally stopped being the solution. And if you are sitting somewhere right now, listening to this, doing that same math, counting the cost of what it would mean to stop absorbing someone else's damage, I want you to know something. The cost of staying is higher. It always is. Have you ever had to choose yourself over someone who was supposed to choose you first? Tell me your story in the comments. And if this hit something real for you, leave a like. It means more than you know.